Hi, I'm Toby Brown, and I am going to be walking you through one of my lesson plans today. It is the Design Challenge lesson plan for Women's History Month. So, first off, you probably found this on my website. We have pages, Design Challenge lesson plan, and then also on the homepage, Design Challenge lesson plan that you can just click on. And then you get pulled over here where it has our big title and then all of the things that you'll need to teach this lesson, the lesson plan itself, the presentation that you will show to the students, and then the student handout that you are to print and hand to the students as a tool for self-reflection. So first off, let's start with the presentation. So it starts out with a picture of Marsha P. Johnson right there and the title. And I'm just going to go through a little bit of how I would introduce this to the students. So I would just say, hi students, happy Women's History Month, or hi class, happy Women's History Month. Today we are going to learn how to tell important stories, specifically the stories of women. So first off, do any of you guys know who this is right here? And then I just point to Frida Kahlo and see if anybody knows. And this is for 5th and 6th grades, so probably someone will know and get their answer, what they know about her, whatever seems interesting, and the kids want to speak about. Some might be really excited about her, some might only briefly know about her, but after that, be like, yes, this is Frida Kahlo. She is a painter from Mexico, and we are going to look at a little bit more about her later. But for her and people like other women in history that have made waves, such as Amelia Earhart, Rosa Parks, why is it important, or is it important to tell these stories? And why or why not? And so I asked, is it important to tell these stories specifically? Why or why not? Because I don't want to have a leading question for my students. I want them to be able to think for themselves whether they think these stories are important or not. And if they don't, hopefully we can change their mind after the lesson is over. And if not, that's totally fine. Next, I would ask the students, what does history teach us? Which I think is a really fun reflection question. It's really broad and it gets them thinking like, why are we learning this stuff at all? So after you get their answers, flip the page and go to this slide, which says different kinds of books telling the same stories. So for this slide, I would have a couple books in hand too. I use Frida Kahlo as my example, but you can totally use stories of other women if you have different versions of their stories. So we're specifically looking for one that has like no images, like a novel and chapter book, and one that is full of a lot of images, like the children's book or the graphic novel and comic. You don't have to have all three. I think just a novel and chapter book and the children's book, that would be fine too. The graphic novel slash comic is good because that's what we're going to be working on in our activity later. So it's just good to get an example of that. So bring those up and say, look at these three different books. Why do you guys think there are different versions? And then they can say why they think, probably pointing out like, oh, this one is thick and has a lot of words, so it's obviously for somebody older. This one's like a children's book and it has just pictures and simple words, so it's for children. Or maybe they say, oh, it tells different parts of her life, different things like that. Then you ask, what version would you learn the best from? So the kids can think of how they learn, and then you also get the chance to learn something about the student. If one is like, oh, I would learn from the chapter book the best, well, that's interesting because most students would probably pick one with more pictures. So that's a special student. That's somebody that you might want to give more writings or readings to, things like that. So that's going to provide you some information as well as getting them to think. Next slide, we're going to start our activity, part 1, simplifying a story. Now beforehand, I would have the lesson on storyboarding and writing, and hopefully the kids would have gotten some introduction to that beforehand, because that is just something that I use regularly in the classroom anyways, so I think that would be good to have that beforehand. I don't have a lesson on it in this particular lesson because that would extend it a bit too long. But if you haven't had a lesson on that, then I would just have that beforehand, a brief introduction to storyboarding. Plus the kids love it. They love making comics and stories. So it's a nice lesson to have. But I'm not going to talk about it too much right now because we are going to be talking about women in history's stories. So to introduce this slide, I would be like, okay, we are going to simplify a story in a way that a lot of people in this room may have chosen, and that's in a comic format. And so first, our step 1 is we are going to work together with your table, and you are going to choose a woman from this list to simplify a momentous part of their life. Okay, and what do I mean by momentous? I'm going to give you an example. So let's take Marsha P. Johnson over here, right? A momentous part of her life is the Stonewall riots. So I would go on my computer, look up a little bit on whatever site on the Stonewall riots and Marsha P. Johnson, and I would simplify that into a comic format and get it ready for storyboarding. So that's what we're working on. Now, say you look at this list and you're like, oh, there's this specific woman that I would really like to write about. Just ask me. I'm sure it's fine. Like, I love it when you guys are passionate, so just ask permission and we can get that going for you. So after you choose your person and then you pick a momentous part in their life to simplify, you're going to work with your team and storyboard it on paper first, creating a 4 to 8 panel comic. Okay? Next, we are going to digitize the comic in Pixton. So if the students haven't used Pixton before, Pixton is very interesting. You can sign in with Clever. So if your students already have Clever accounts, then they can just sign in with the Clever accounts. And if they don't, they can sign in with Google and I think Microsoft. So that's good. And for this project, for this activity, I want the students to have at least 2 characters and dialogue and narrative text bubbles. So I explain in the slide here what dialogue text bubbles look like. So it's over here directed towards the character. And then what narrative text bubbles look like. So like captions describing things that are happening here. And that'll just get a comic that's a lot more informative than if they had just chosen dialogue. So I'm going to click over to Pixton real quick just to show you about it. Let me go back here. And then I think I click it like here. Okay, so this is what the editing software sort of looks like. You have all of your panels on the side here, and you have this sort of rainbow menu on this side here. So a few things to keep in mind when they're in scenes. If you click on it, hello, oh, okay. If you click on it in the panel, it'll pop up the focus, and that's where you get really interesting sort of layouts. And you can choose like dramatic ones or location based ones. So click it from here. So you can get different positions for the character to sort of be around in. And that way the students don't go looking for like multiple scenes. They're like, oh, I need it to be close up here or here. Luckily, these already have them sort of pre-programmed. You can just choose where you want the sort of camera to be looking, so to speak. And then we have the characters in this comic. All of the characters in this comic are right here for mine. And they just pop up per slide of which characters are which. You can edit the characters like so. Creatures and objects. You can add objects for the characters to hold. Change the focus, like I said. Words, we have speech and caption. So speech is the dialogue and caption is the narrative bubbles. So speech, you're going to change the words over here. And then caption is just going to be one caption per panel. And they have 3 different caption styles. So make sure the students know where that is. Faces, they can change the face. All of the buttons for changing things, whether it's object or editing characters, are going to be like right here when you click on the menu. And then actions, body poses, if they're looking fierce or excited, different things like that. You probably won't need effects super much because most of these amazing women don't really have superpowers. I mean, they do, but just not those kind of superpowers. And then they'll click done when they're done and send you the link over so that you can share everybody's work when everybody's finished and have a discussion about that. So that's just some interesting things about Pixton that you should keep in mind when you're working with it. And so you'll introduce that, get them started on Pixton, and then show them your example. This one's my example. It's also linked in the lesson plan. So that way the kids can kind of see whose story and how to simplify it and bring it back. So I would say, okay, remember we talked about Marsha P. Johnson and the Stonewall riots. This is my story and this is how I simplified it. And then I just read it out loud to the students. Maybe have other students act out if you want to. Maybe not for this particular one, but yeah. Next, next is work time. And then after they work and sort of complete their work and you go around helping them is discussion time. So you're going to present your comic and have a sort of comic theater. A different team member for each table is going to read for a different character, and one team member is going to act as a narrator. So they go ahead and do their acting, get into it as much as they feel like, and then take PPQs from people outside their team. So PPQ is praise, polish, question. It's just a nice way to get people thinking about nice things to say while also what we can improve in a kind way. And then just something that we wonder and think and take home. So for the praise, we have what is something that the team did really well. Polish, what is something the team could have improved? And question, what is something this team's project made you wonder? So that's for that. Discussion time part 2. We talk about what are some things you learned about these women in history. Did this change your mind about any preconceptions you had? Did this leave you with more questions than answers? Are there any of these women in history that you would like to learn more about? So depending on how many answers you get for each of these questions is if I would even like ask these questions or not. So if a student really, really wants to talk about like something that they want to know in history that one of these women did, then just let them talk. It's okay if you can't get through all 3 of these questions or all of the students, just some interesting points. And finally, the takeaway question. How did the format of a comic affect your learning? which is a really nice one for them to take away because they can think of, oh, what is my learning style? How can I learn better and really be a part of that learning process? And maybe if I need to read something, how can I visualize it creatively, or how can I get like more images in order to learn better and just absorb things better? And on this last slide, I have G. Willow Wilson, which is the creator of Miss Marvel, the Kamala Khan version, which is the most modern one that most students would know if they know Miss Marvel. So you can just be like, ah, another famous woman in history, the creator of Miss Marvel. And hopefully some kids will like that. And if they don't, that's fine. Okay, so that's the presentation. Next, I'm going to show you the reflection assessment that I made. So this I use for all of my different lesson plans. They write the project name, their name, the class, and the date, and then they PPQ themselves. So they say, what do they think was their strengths, and where were they most successful, and where were they weak and least successful, and what could they take to improve for next time. This one specifically is my favorite because then the students can take from other people and what they did well in their projects and feel like, how can that I apply that to myself so I can do as good as they did, because they got like a lot of praise, and I want to get that level of praise. So that's the reflection assessment for them. And lastly, the lesson plan. So standards to be addressed. You can take a look at those. The design challenge theme. Mostly I want to take a look at the estimated amount of time, because this is a 90-minute estimated lesson. Things change all of the time when you actually have students in there, so it's okay if it doesn't take 90 minutes, or if you need to extend the lesson further and add like a storyboard lesson inside of that. You can split it into 2 days, something like that, or two, I mean, yeah, 4 hours. So first, we start with the introduction to the lesson, and that's about 25 minutes for that. That's just going through the presentation. I think I may have gotten through the presentation a little bit quicker than that, which is awesome. That just means more work time, which is where we really want to focus all of our time on this project. So our work time for opening Pixton and learning the basics of the site, observing their understanding, noticing which historical figures they're going to be drawn to and relate to, walking around and just making sure there's just a nice flow of work going on and that everybody sort of understands what they're doing. And then about 15 minutes for class discussion and lesson summary. The questions that I put, probably themselves, if all students were answering, it would take way longer than 15 minutes. And that's why sometimes we can't take all of the hands. But if there's a lot of discussion happening, then that's great. That just means the kids were really interested in this topic. And if there isn't, then that's something for you to learn from too. At the end of the lesson plan, we have the assessments. So that's what I already showed you. The final product example, which I also already showed you, and the presentation link, which of course I already showed you. This right here is also interesting, differentiation. This is particularly interesting to observe the students who are the boys in your classroom, because a lot of them might not find anything particularly relatable. So you can sort of assess their level of what are they relating to, and perhaps are they able to empathize with the struggle of these characters that they might not relate to? And hopefully they'll be able to reach some sort of deeper level, and if not, that's something to note for next time. All right, that is the lesson plan. I hope it was helpful and I hope you get really great results.